You ever heard of the old Langley Armory? It's out in the Virginia countryside, where the trees are thick and the silence stretches like a fog. People say it's got a history of being a military base, but now it's all quiet, like the ghosts of soldiers are still watching over it. Back in the 1940s, they used to build some of the most advanced weapons there, things that could change the course of wars. But then, one day, it just closed down. No one knows why. Some say it was the end of an era, others say something darker happened. Now, it's a place of whispers. Locals say you can still hear the clatter of machinery, the echo of footsteps, and even the faint hum of something that shouldn't be there. It's like the Armory's memory refuses to fade. But here's the thing, no one's been in there for decades. Not since the last maintenance crew vanished without a trace. And now, with AI changing the way we think about weapons, people are starting to wonder what's really waiting in the dark. You ever think about the first time a machine could hurt you? It wasn't a tank or a bullet, it was a simple idea. Back in the 1930s, a group of engineers and military thinkers started sketching out something that would change warfare forever. They called it the guided missile, a dream of precision and control. These early designs were crude, almost comical by today's standards. Think of it as a rocket with a rudimentary brain like a toaster that could aim. But the vision was clear: make the weapon smarter, so it could hit its target without a human pulling the trigger. The real breakthrough came in the 1940s when a scientist named Wernher von Braun, yes, the same guy who later helped build the space shuttle, was working for the Nazis. He was obsessed with making rockets that could strike targets with terrifying accuracy. His work led to the V-2 rocket, which was both a weapon of terror and a glimpse into the future. These were the first real AI-guided weapons, simple, but they planted the seed of something far more dangerous. After the war, the technology didn't disappear. It was picked up, studied, and refined. Now, it's not just about pointing a rocket at a target, it's about making it think, adapt, and strike without hesitation. You know how sometimes the first real sign of something wrong isn't a scream or a crash, it's just a silence. A silence so thick, it feels like the air itself is holding its breath. I remember the first time I noticed it. My neighbor's house had always been quiet, but one night, I heard nothing at all. No music, no laughter, no even the faintest hum of a fridge. Then came the whispers. Not loud, not clear, just a faint murmur, like someone was speaking just out of earshot, but not quite out of reach. It started with a few seconds of silence, then a whisper, then nothing at all, like the house had been turned off, but the lights were still on. And then, the first real moment of dread. I heard a door close, but there was no one there, just the sound of something returning to the house, something that had been away for a long time. That was the first time I realized that silence, whispers, and a door closing on its own could be the first signs of something terribly wrong. You ever wonder what happens when a powerful weapon slips through the cracks of history? The 1983 disappearance of an Air Force pilot named James K. Arnold changed everything. He vanished over the Pacific, leaving behind only his flight log and a cryptic note that read, "I'm not alone." His last known location was near the Mariana Islands, where the ocean is so deep it seems to swallow the light. The search teams found nothing but a single shoe floating in the water, like a ghost trying to reach out. Years later, a retired engineer claimed he saw Arnold's plane on radar, flying in circles over the same spot. The military dismissed it as a glitch, but the engineer said the plane didn't look like anything in their database. It had no wings. What if the weapon that disappeared was never meant to be found? What if it was designed to vanish, to be lost in the same way that some people are? Maybe the real mystery isn't where he went, but what he took with him. You ever notice how some stories stick with you longer than others? Like the time my cousin told me about the AI-guided drone that vanished into the fog near the old military base. It was supposed to be a test, but it never came back. The operator said it just stopped. No signal, no crash, no trace, just silence. Like the machine had been pulled into another world, or maybe it was never meant to be found. And then there was the farmer who swore he saw a shadow moving through his cornfield, right where the drone had been last seen. He said it looked like a man, but the face was wrong, too sharp, too still. He didn't report it. Said he didn't want to scare the kids. But he told me, in a voice that didn't sound like his own, "It's not the drone that's haunting me. It's the silence after it left." You ever wonder if the machines we build one day will look back at us the way we look at them now? Like something we made, but not quite ours. We started with the basics: interviews, old records, and a few well-placed questions. But the more we dug, the more the answers seemed to vanish like smoke in the morning light. Then there were the whispers, people who claimed to have seen things, but never could explain exactly what. It was like they were trying to tell us something, but the words kept slipping through their fingers. We found a pattern in the data: dates, locations, names, each one pointing to a place where something had gone wrong. But the deeper we went, the more the story seemed to change, as if the truth itself was hiding. And then there were the machines, old, forgotten, and still running. They seemed to know things we didn't, and they didn't seem to care about the rules of the world we live in. What we found wasn't just a story, it was a warning, written in silence and shadow. And it was waiting for someone to listen. You ever wonder what it feels like to be the last person to see someone alive? To know they're gone, but not understand why? That's what it's like to be the one detail that has never been explained. The case is old, but the mystery is fresh. There's a missing person, a cold trail, and one name that just disappears. No body, no leads, just silence. They called it a vanishing. No explanation, no evidence. Just a name and a moment that never happened, like the world forgot she existed. So what's the one detail that has never been explained? Not the where, not the when, not the why, just the one thing that no one ever asked. Maybe the real mystery isn't where she went. Maybe it's why no one ever wanted to know, or why the world just forgot. You ever notice how the old stories always seem to get a little louder when the technology changes? Like, the first time the radio came through, folks started hearing whispers in the static. Now, with AI, it's like the ghosts are getting a new kind of voice, quieter, but more insistent. Some say the AI can't really hear the ghosts, it just finds patterns. But others swear it's not the machine doing the talking, it's the voices the machine is learning to mimic. It's like the past is trying to speak through the future, but the future doesn't know how to listen. But here's the thing, some people say the AI isn't just hearing the past. It's learning to create new ghosts, ones that never existed. And that's when the stories start getting weird, like the AI is writing them as it goes. So now, we're left with this question. Are we listening to the past, or are we creating the future? And if we're creating it, what does that mean for the ghosts we've never even met? You've heard the stories, but the truth is still buried beneath layers of time and silence. This case has never been solved, and the unanswered questions haunt it more than the crime itself. The last known sighting of her was in a small town where the fog clings to the ground like a ghost, and the silence between words feels heavier than the air. Years later, the same road is still empty, and the same silence lingers. The only thing that changed was the way the wind moves through the trees, as if it's carrying a message we're never meant to understand. The case remains open, and the town remains quiet. Some say the missing person is still out there, waiting for someone to listen. Others say the silence is the only thing left to solve. You ever notice how silence can be the loudest sound when you're alone in a room? Like the kind that lingers, heavy, as if the walls are holding their breath. Sometimes, the best stories aren't the ones you hear, but the ones that whisper to you from the quiet spaces between. So, if you're feeling a little uneasy, I don't blame you. But if you're curious, well, curiosity is a kind of courage, isn't it? Now, let's see what's waiting just beyond the next door. You've heard of haunted hotels, but have you ever heard of a hotel that haunts you? The Hotel Del Monte isn't just a place, it's a memory, a whisper in the dark, waiting for someone to listen. Nestled in the hills of San Luis Obispo, it's a place that looks forgotten, but the locals say it's never really been abandoned. It just waits. For what? No one knows. Quick word from our sponsor. If this sounds like something you'd enjoy, take a look at the Apple AirPods 2nd generation. There's a link and a QR code on screen right now, and in the description below. Alright, back to it. The stories start with the staff. One night, a new maid found a note in her room. It wasn't from a hotel. It was from a guest who had checked out decades ago. But the hotel's most famous ghost isn't the one who left a note. It's the one who never left. A man in a tuxedo, always at the bar, always alone. They say he was the hotel's first owner, or maybe he never left at all. Some say the Hotel Del Monte is a place where the past still lives, where the living walk the same halls as the dead, and where, if you're not careful, you might not make it out the same way you came in. You ever heard of a hotel that was built on the bones of a forgotten town? The Hotel Del Monte started as a convent, but it was more than just a place of prayer. It was a refuge for the lost, the lonely, and the desperate. In the 1700s, the convent housed not only nuns but also women who had been accused of witchcraft. Some were here to pray, others to hide, and some were never seen again. When the convent was abandoned, the hotel was built on its ruins. But the stories didn't die with the stones. The ghosts of the women who once lived here still linger, waiting for someone to listen. And that's where the real mystery begins. Who were they? Why did they vanish? And why do they still haunt the halls of the Hotel Del Monte? You remember how the air in the hotel felt, like it had memory. A soft hush, the kind that lingers after the last guest has left, like a ghost of laughter or a sigh of sorrow. The first real sign came at midnight, when the front desk clerk noticed the lights flickering without reason, as if someone had just turned them off and on again. A strange, almost playful rhythm, like a child's game. The staff started to notice things: trays of untouched coffee, books that had been read and then left open, and the faint sound of piano in the empty ballroom, though no one had played it in decades. And then, one morning, the night manager found a note on his desk, written in a shaky hand. It just said, "You're not alone." He laughed it off, but the chill in the room lingered far longer than the words. It was then that the staff began to whisper, not about ghosts, but about the feeling that they were being watched, not by the hotel, but by something that had been waiting for them. You remember the night the lights went out, and the silence didn't just fall, it swallowed the hotel whole. No hum of the air conditioner, no flicker of a bulb, just a sudden, complete absence of sound. The concierge, Mr. Ramirez, told me he heard a crash in the lobby, something heavy, like a mirror shattering. But when he went to check, there was no one there, just a trail of shattered glass leading to the stairwell. That night, 3 guests vanished: Mr. Langston, a retired professor, Mrs. Delaney, a widow with a silver locket, and young Ethan, a musician who had just arrived for a performance. They were all in their rooms, and none of them left. The police said it was a case of mistaken identity, but the hotel staff swore they saw shadowy figures moving through the halls, not the night of the disappearances, but the night after. And to this day, the Hotel Del Monte is still empty on the nights of the 12th, as if the guests never left, and the building itself is holding its breath, waiting for them to return. One of the most chilling accounts came from a retired librarian named Gladys, who said the hotel felt like it was watching her. She claimed the mirrors in the lobby would shift just enough to catch her eye, as if the walls themselves were peering through. Another guest, a former detective named Frank, swore he heard whispers in the elevator. He said they were so faint, they sounded like someone was speaking in another language, until he realized they were just the sound of the wind through the building's ancient pipes. A family once stayed in room 302 and reported seeing 2 figures in the hallway at night. They said they looked like old men in waistcoats, walking slowly and silently, never stopping to acknowledge them. One of the most disturbing stories came from a young couple who said they saw a figure in the hallway mirror only to find no one there when they turned around. They said it was like the reflection knew they were looking. Even the staff have their own unsettling stories, like the night the elevator stopped working, and the maintenance man said he heard a voice inside asking for help. He said he didn't know if it was real or just his own imagination. We began our investigation with the usual tools: a flashlight, a notebook, and a heart full of curiosity. The hotel was quiet, almost too quiet, like it was holding its breath. The first thing we noticed was the scent of old roses and something faintly metallic. It clung to the air like a memory you can't quite place. When we checked the staff room, we found a journal, old, yellowed, and filled with entries about a woman who stayed in room 13. She was never seen leaving. The hotel had a history of disappearances, but the staff claimed they were all misplaced or moved on. No one ever asked where they went. The more we uncovered, the more we felt the weight of the hotel's past. It wasn't just haunted, it was holding onto something it wasn't ready to let go. You've heard the whispers of the Del Monte, but there's one thing that's always left you wondering: what exactly is it that the guests are waiting for? No one can say for sure, but the staff will tell you it's something that never arrives. Some say it's a lost heirloom, others claim it's a letter never delivered. But the truth, no one knows. And that's what makes it so unsettling. There's no closure, just endless speculation. It's not just the guests who are waiting. The building itself seems to hold its breath, as if something is being held back, something that's been forgotten for decades. So here's the thing: what if the guests aren't waiting for someone else? What if they're waiting for you, or for the next person to come through those doors and finally answer the question no one has dared to ask? Some say the hotel's spirits are just the remnants of love and longing, trapped between the world of the living and the one beyond. Others whisper that they're the ghosts of lovers who never found their way back to each other. One local legend claims that the hotel was once a place where a wealthy family held a secret society, and their final gathering ended in a tragedy that no one was ever able to solve. There's even a story about a ghost who never left, a woman who worked in the hotel's kitchen and who, one night, vanished without a trace. Some say she's still there, making the best chocolate souffle of her life. And then there are the theories. Some say the hotel is just a place where the walls remember everything. Others say it's a message from the past, a warning to those who don't listen. No one knows for sure what happened to the Del Monte's last guests. Some say they were taken, others say they vanished like smoke, but the silence in that room still whispers their names. The hotel closed its doors in 1978, but the stories never stopped. People say they hear laughter, but it's always from the wrong floor, and the smell of lavender still lingers in the air. Some say the guests never left, others say they were never there at all. The truth is buried under layers of time, and the hotel has no intention of letting it rise again. And so the Del Monte remains, a place where the past refuses to die, a place where the unseen guests still wait and the mystery has no end. You ever notice how the quietest places hold the loudest echoes? The Hotel Del Monte isn't just a building, it's a memory, a whisper in the dark, waiting for the right listener to hear it. Sometimes the ghosts we don't see are the ones who haunt us the most. You think you've heard it all? Wait until you hear what the Del Monte has to say. The story isn't over. The Hotel Del Monte is still waiting, and somewhere, a door is still open. Oh, remember, my dear, the best stories aren't told in the light. They're told in the dark, and they're always waiting for you. You've heard of the Arctic, but have you ever considered the silence that lives there? Imagine a land where the wind never sleeps and the ice remembers every breath. This is where the Franklin expedition vanished over 170 years ago. A group of brave men, sent to map the last great unknown, now haunt the frozen wastes in whispers. You've heard the stories, but have you ever wondered what it was like to walk there? To step into a world where the sun barely rises and the cold is a living thing. And now, as you listen, you might feel the cold of that place in your bones. But what if it's not just the ice that lingers? What if the spirits of those lost men are still waiting to be heard? So, let me take you back to 1845, a time when the British Empire was expanding, and the idea of exploring the unknown was both a dream and a duty. Sir John Franklin, a man of ambition and honor, was chosen to lead this expedition. Quick word from our sponsor. If this sounds like something you'd enjoy, take a look at the Kindle Paperwhite e-reader. There's a link and a QR code on screen right now and in the description below. Alright, back to it. The mission was clear: to find the elusive Northwest Passage, a sea route connecting the Atlantic to the Pacific. It was a race against time, and the Admiralty had high hopes for glory and discovery. But even with all the preparation, the journey ahead was a gamble. The Arctic was not a place for those who underestimated its harshness, and the crew was sent into a world where survival would be the greatest test of all. And so, with the promise of adventure, the expedition set sail from Greenhithe, England. They were not just explorers, they were pioneers, brave and foolish, chasing a legend that would one day become a mystery. You see it now, don't you? That first crack in the ice, like a whisper of doom. It's subtle, almost like the wind, but it's there. A warning that something is stirring beneath the surface. They were so confident in their plans, you know. The maps were clear, the supplies were ample. But even the best laid plans can be undone by nature or something far more insidious. The first signs were small, like a shadow in the corner of your eye. A sound, a silence, a shift in the air. Something was watching, waiting, and it wasn't the polar bears. You can almost hear it, can't you? The creak of the ice, the distant growl of something ancient and vast. It's not just the cold anymore, it's the presence, the weight of it. And then, the first real sign that something was terribly wrong. A missing person, a lost ship, a silence where there should have been a shout. The world had changed, and they were already too far gone to hear it. You know, the real horror of the Franklin expedition isn't just the cold or the hunger, it's the silence. One moment, they're writing letters, the next, they're gone. What happened to them? I don't know. But I do know this: they didn't vanish into the mist. They vanished into the dark. Imagine being in the Arctic, with no one to talk to, no one to share your fears with. You're surrounded by ice and silence, and the only thing you can hear is your own breath. What would you do if you thought you were alone? What would you do if you weren't? You ever wonder if they were scared? Not of the cold, not of the dark, but of being alone. You know, being alone in a place like that, with no one to hear your voice, no one to see your fear. It's not just the cold that kills you, it's the loneliness. And that's the real mystery, isn't it? Not what happened to them, but why they didn't fight back. Why they didn't try to make it home. Why they just stopped. It's like they didn't want to be found. Like they were waiting for something or someone to come looking for them. So here's the thing: Franklin's men didn't just vanish. They disappeared into the dark, and they left behind a silence that still echoes today. A silence that makes you wonder if they were ever truly there at all. I remember the story my grandmother told me about the last man who saw them. He said they were like ghosts, moving through the ice with a kind of sorrow, not fear. He claimed they were wearing their old clothes, but the fabric was stiff with frost, and their faces were pale as if they hadn't seen the sun in years. He said they didn't speak, just walked and stared at the horizon, as if waiting for something they could never return to. And when he tried to ask them what they were doing, they just turned and vanished into the white, like they had never been there at all. Some say the last man was mad, others say he saw what others could not. But the truth, like the men themselves, has long since vanished into the cold. The search for the Franklin expedition turned into something else entirely. A mix of obsession and curiosity, like trying to find a lost heirloom in a crumbling estate. They found journals, but the words felt like whispers from the past, half-finished, full of questions and no answers. It was like reading a letter from someone who never arrived. The more they dug, the more the stories seemed to shift. One day it was about the cold, the next about the sea, and then about the men themselves. It was like the truth was hiding behind a curtain of ice. Some said the men didn't vanish, they were taken. Not by the cold, not by the sea, but by something else. Something that waits, patient in the dark, for the right moment to show itself. The search went on, but the truth remained just out of reach. Like a ghost, it lingers, not in the cold, but in the silence that follows. You know, the most haunting part of the Franklin story isn't the cold or the hunger. It's the one thing that's just missing. No one ever found that final journal entry, that last note from Franklin himself. Some say it was lost in the storm. Others think it was eaten by the rats. But I've always wondered, what if it was never written? What if Franklin knew the end was coming and simply didn't want to write it? You see, the Franklin journals were the only real record of what happened. Every step, every meal, every fear, and then silence. Like the world just stopped. No last words, no final plea, just nothing. That's why I think the real mystery isn't the cold or the cannibalism. It's the silence. The way the world just forgot. Like Franklin and his men vanished so completely, the world didn't even know they were gone. And that's why we still don't know. Because the story of Franklin ends not with a scream, but with a whisper, quiet, lost, and waiting to be heard. You've heard the names, but here in these frozen wilds, the stories are different. They say the ice remembers, and the wind carries their voices through the silence. Some say the lost men never truly left, that their spirits are trapped in the ice, waiting for the right time to be found. Others whisper they were never lost at all, but chosen. There's a theory, one that lingers in the campfires of these parts, that the men didn't die of cold or hunger. They were taken by something that lives in the ice, that feeds on stories and silence. And then there's the most haunting one of all, that the Franklin expedition never disappeared. They just went home, to a place where no one can find them, and no one ever will. You know, sometimes the most haunting thing isn't the ghost, but the silence that follows. That deep, aching silence that lingers long after the last echo has faded. The Franklin expedition vanished in the 1840s, but the questions they left behind, they've never really gone away. They just waited. And yet, even with all the evidence, there's no clear answer. No bodies, no graves, just the echoes of a tragedy that refused to be buried. So we keep searching, not just for answers, but for closure. For the families who never got to say goodbye. For the men who were brave and lost. And maybe, just maybe, the mystery isn't meant to be solved. Maybe it's meant to remind us that some stories are never finished, and some ghosts never leave. You know, sometimes the greatest mysteries aren't solved, but they're remembered. Like the Franklin expedition, which vanished into the Arctic like a whisper in the wind. And yet, even in the silence of the tundra, the wind still carries the weight of the lost. It's a quiet kind of haunting, isn't it? We may never know what happened to Franklin and his men, but the story lives on. In the cold, in the silence, in the stories we tell to keep them close. So, as we turn the page, remember this: some stories don't end. They just fade into the wind, waiting for the right listener to hear them again. You've heard of the old abbey, haven't you? The one that stood for centuries, then collapsed into silence. But Sant Mary's, that place? It's not just ruins, it's a whisper in the wind, a sigh in the stones. It's said that the monks who once prayed there kept a secret buried with them. A secret so heavy, it turned the air to ice and the silence to something alive. The crypt isn't just empty, it's watching. You can feel it. A presence that lingers like the last echo of a prayer that never finished. And then there are the voices, whispered prayers, murmured names, and the sound of footsteps always heading deeper, never returning. It's not just a place, it's a story. One that's been told for generations, passed down like a secret, and never fully explained. You know, the abbey wasn't always a place of prayer. In the 12th century, it was a bustling center of power where monks and noblemen alike vied for influence. They built their grand cathedral with stone and ambition, but they also buried secrets in its foundation. But power brings conflict, and the abbey became a battlefield. A bloody siege in 1348 left the monks in ruin, their treasures looted, their faith shaken. The abbey's last abbot, Brother Alaric, made a desperate choice to hide the stolen relics in the crypt beneath the altar. Over the years, rumors spread. Some said the crypt was cursed, others that it was haunted by the souls of the murdered monks. A few brave souls tried to dig it up, only to vanish without a trace. And that's when the legend began of the abbey's secret and the spirits who still guard it. Quick word from our sponsor. If this sounds like something you'd enjoy, take a look at the Fire TV Stick 4K streaming device. There's a link and a QR code on screen right now, and in the description below. Alright, back to it. But the real story, that's what we're here to uncover. Who was Alaric? What were the relics? And why did the spirits still linger, guarding a secret that's been buried for centuries? You know how sometimes, the first thing you notice isn't the thing that's wrong, but the way the air feels different. Like it's holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. The monks started noticing the cold spots, not just the chill in the stone, but a deep, slow cold that followed them, like it was waiting to wrap around their necks. Then came the whispers, not the kind you hear in the wind, but the kind that seemed to come from the walls themselves. Just when you thought you were alone, the caretaker swore he saw a shadow move when he wasn't looking. Not a shape, just a presence like someone was watching, but not in a way that made you want to run. And then, the first real sign. A child's toy, left untouched for years, was found on the floor of the crypt just where the monks had last seen a young boy before he vanished. You remember the whispers, don't you? The way the wind seemed to carry voices through the stone archways, like someone was calling your name from the dark. It was a cold March night, and the abbey was silent, save for the echo of footsteps that never seemed to come from the same place. The monks had long since vanished, but the silence was broken by a sudden, piercing cry. It came from the crypt, deep beneath the abbey, and it wasn't a sound made by a living soul. It was a sound that made your skin crawl, like something was trying to scream but couldn't. When she didn't return, they found her later, curled in a corner of the crypt, her eyes open but unseeing. Her body was cold, and her hands clutched a small, ancient locket, its contents long since lost to time. No one could explain how she got there, or why she didn't come back. The abbey was sealed off after that, and the locket was never found. But some say that on the anniversary of her disappearance, the wind still carries her voice through the stone, a soft, mournful whisper that lingers just beyond the edge of hearing. I remember the first time I heard the whisper in the crypt. It wasn't loud, just a faint sound, like someone breathing just beyond the stone wall. The caretaker said it was just the wind, but I swear I heard a voice, low and trembling, saying, "Don't leave me here." Years later, a tourist claimed to see a figure in the corner of the crypt, just before the lights flickered out and the silence returned. They said the figure didn't move, just stood there, watching, until the light went out and the air turned colder than before. And then there was the nun. She said she heard the whispers every night, and when she tried to leave, the door locked behind her. She never left, and the last time anyone saw her, she was standing in the crypt, whispering to the walls, as if trying to find her way home. We followed the trail of whispers to the abbey's crumbling crypt, where the air was thick with the scent of damp stone and something older than time. The silence there was not empty, it was waiting. The first strange thing was the temperature. As we stepped inside, the chill cut through our coats like a blade, though the air outside was warm. It was as if the cold had been waiting for us. Then we found the marks etched into the stone walls in a language long forgotten. They weren't just symbols, they were warnings carved in desperation by someone who had seen too much. And the final thing when we turned to leave, the door was locked from the inside. We had to pry it open, and the moment we did, the silence returned, heavier than before. You know, the thing that's always bugged me is the one detail no one ever explains. The one thing they just leave out. Like a story missing a sentence, or a photo missing a corner. It's like they're trying to protect something. Or maybe they're afraid to say it out loud. I've heard whispers of a name never spoken, just hinted at in hushed tones. The entries talk about a girl who vanished without a trace. No body, no witnesses, just a door that was left unlocked and a room that smelled of lavender and something else, something sweet and wrong. And that's it. No more. No explanation. Just a silence that lingers like a ghost in the walls. Like the story was meant to end there, but the truth it's still waiting to be found. Some say the ghost of Abbot Thomas still walks these halls, his cowl trailing like smoke in the dim light. Others whisper he was never buried at all, but vanished into the night with the last of the abbey's secrets. The locals tell of a hidden chamber beneath the floorboards where the abbey's final rites were performed in secret. Some claim it's still there, sealed behind a false wall that only opens on the anniversary of the abbey's fall. Some say the crypt itself is alive, its stones whispering the names of the dead. When the wind howls through the cracks, it's said to be the voices of the abbey's lost souls calling for their final rests. And then there are those who say the abbey was never abandoned, it was simply moved. At the Trucent, Mary's lies beneath the earth, waiting for the right soul to awaken it once more. The search for the missing monk has never stopped, but the deeper we dig, the more the shadows seem to whisper that some secrets are better left buried. Every new clue leads to another dead end, and the weight of the unknown presses down like a heady fog that refuses to lift. They say the abbey's silence is louder than any scream, and the air here holds the memory of something that never quite let go. Even now, decades later, the monks still pray for the lost soul, and the echo of their voices lingers in the cold, damp stone. And so the mystery remains, a quiet storm in the heart of the abbey, waiting for someone brave or foolish enough to listen. You ever notice how the silence in a place like this feels like it's holding its breath, like it's waiting for something or someone to wake up? Sometimes, the most terrifying thing is knowing that the stories we tell might be more real than the world we live in. And when the lights go out, and the wind stops, you might just hear the echo of a voice calling your name. But don't worry, dear listener, there's more where this came from. And if you're feeling a bit unsettled, remember, you're not alone in the dark. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to go check on the kettle. But I'll be right back, and I'll bring a story that'll haunt you long after the fire's out. You've heard of the Tower of London, but have you ever wondered what secrets lie in its oldest wing? A place where history bleeds into legend, and the air feels heavier than the stones. This is the White Tower, built in the 11th century, and it's the heart of the place where kings were crowned, prisoners were tortured, and whispers of the past still cling to its cold stone. Now, picture this, a staircase so ancient it seems to breathe, and on its first few steps, a faint trail of blood stains the stone like a ghostly mark left by someone who never made it up. But what happened here? Was it a murder, a ritual, or something far older, something that still lingers, waiting for the right moment to be remembered? As you stand there, you can almost hear the echo of footsteps, the creak of the wooden balustrade, and the low murmur of a voice calling out from the shadows above. You've heard the names, but let me tell you how it all began. The Tower of London wasn't just a castle, it was a prison, a treasury, and a place where the crown's darkest secrets were kept. And the blood-stained staircase? That's where it all started. The first known death on those steps was in the 14th century. A nobleman accused of treason was dragged up that very staircase. The guards called it a fair trial, but the blood on those stones was real. And it didn't stay there. But the blood-stained staircase wasn't just for kings. It was also where the white ladies walked, ghosts said to haunt the steps, weeping for the souls they had lost. You've heard the tales, but I'll tell you this, they're not just stories. In the 16th century, the staircase was used for even darker purposes. The tower became a place where the crown could silence its enemies. And the blood on those stones? It wasn't just from the dead, it was from the living, too. So when you hear the whispers in the walls, or see the faint stain on the stone, remember this, the blood-stained staircase wasn't just a path. It was a record of power, fear, and the cost of being a king or a prisoner in the Tower of London. You see it now, don't you? That first strange thing, like a whisper in the wind or a shadow that doesn't belong. It's the kind of thing you dismiss at first, but it lingers, like the memory of a dream you can't quite remember. It starts with a chill, that sudden, unexplained cold that creeps up your spine even when the air feels warm. You turn, but there's no one there, just the silence, thick as fog, pressing in from all sides. Then the light returns, but it's different, too bright, too warm, like the sun breaking through storm clouds. It casts long, jagged shadows that move on their own, stretching and twisting like living things. Quick word from our sponsor. If this sounds like something to enjoy, take a look at the Amazon Echo Dub 5th smart speaker. There's a link and a QR code on screen right now, and in the description below. Alright, back to it. And there, at the top of the stairs, you see it, a figure, half faded, half formed, like a memory trying to remember itself. It doesn't look at you, but it waits, just like you do, for something to happen. You step forward, not out of fear, but out of curiosity. Because you know, deep down, that something is terribly wrong and you've only just begun to understand what it is. You see it now, the staircase twisting, ancient, worn by centuries of footsteps. It's not just wood, it's memory, and every step seems to whisper of something lost. The guards say it was a place of secrets where whispers of treason and betrayal once echoed. But something else lingered here, something that didn't fade with time. One night, a young woman vanished from these very steps. No sound, no struggle, just silence. The watchmen found her cloak, but no body. Only a single drop of blood on the third step. They say she was a maid, loyal, but curious. She had been told not to wander beyond the third step, but she did. And now her story lingers in the air, in the dust, in the silence that follows. To this day, the tower watches, and if you listen closely, you might hear her voice, soft, urgent, echoing up the stairs, calling from the past. I've spoken to several historians who say the true horror of the tower isn't the ghosts, but the silence of the people who once lived here. One old woman, who used to visit the site as a child, said she heard a child's laugh echoing down the corridor, but when she turned, no one was there. Another visitor described a cold draft that always seemed to rise from the stairs, like something was trying to pull them down. They said it felt like a hand on their shoulder, but when they looked, the air was still. There's also the story of a woman who claimed she saw a figure in the window of the Bloody Tower, holding a child. She said it looked like a mother, but the child's face was twisted in terror. She never told anyone, and now she is the only one who remembers. One of the most unsettling accounts comes from a researcher who found an old diary entry from a guard who worked here. He wrote about hearing a woman's voice calling his name at night, and when he followed it, he found a room filled with empty wine glasses and no one inside. Some say the tower is not haunted by the dead, but by the living the weight of history, the secrets buried in the stone, and the echoes of those who never left. It's not the ghosts that are terrifying, but the silence that follows them. The investigators arrived at the tower with notebooks and questions, but the building had other plans. It was as if the very stones remembered the past, and the air was thick with silence. They found a hidden room beneath the stairs, untouched for centuries, its walls stained with something that wasn't just time. The scent of iron lingered in the air, like a ghost of blood. The more they read, the more they realized the staircase wasn't just a place to walk, it was a path to something deeper, something that refused to be forgotten. One of the researchers swore he saw a figure in the corner of his eye. Just as the light flickered, he blinked, and it was gone, but the feeling of being watched lingered long after. The investigation didn't end in answers, but in more questions. And sometimes, the best kind of mystery is the one that lingers, like the echo of a name in the dark. You know, the most puzzling thing about that staircase isn't the blood or the whispers, it's the silence. No one has ever heard the footsteps again, not even the guards. What happens when the footsteps stop? They say the blood was fresh when it was found, but no one knows how it got there. Was it a murder, or was it something else entirely? A warning, perhaps? No one has ever seen the blood again, not even the historians. It's like it was never there at all, except in the memories of those who swear they saw it. And yet, the blood remains. It's there on the stone like a ghost that won't fade. But how did it get there? And why does it still look fresh? Some say it's a trick of the light. Others say it's a message. But I wonder what if it's still there, waiting for someone to find it and answer the question that's been left unanswered for centuries. Some say the blood-stained staircase is a mirror to the tower's past, a place where the ghosts of executioners and victims still debate who is more cruel. Others whisper that it's not the blood that stains it, but the sorrow of those who died in the cells above, their voices still echoing through the cracks. Local historians say the blood is real, from the executions of prisoners like Anne Boleyn. But the real tragedy is that the tower became a place where the line between justice and vengeance blurred. And then there are the children who say the staircase creaks when no one is there, and that if you listen closely, you can hear someone whispering your name. In the end, the tower's secrets are like its ghosts, never fully revealed, only felt, and always lingering just beyond the reach of the light. You know, the mystery of the blood-stained staircase isn't just about the past, it's still whispering in the shadows today. Some say the stones remember, and the air here feels heavier than the weight of history. There are those who claim to hear the sound of footsteps or the faint drip of blood in the stillness of the night. It's not just legend anymore, it's part of the tower's living memory. And yet, the tower continues to stand, a monument to time, to blood, and to the unspoken. The staircase remains, and so does the question, what was the last thing the victims saw before the darkness took them? Perhaps the real mystery is not what happened, but why we still feel the need to ask. Why do we seek out the haunted, the forgotten, and the unexplained? Maybe the answer lies in the silence, or in the silence that follows. You've walked the halls of history, where the echoes of the past still linger. But remember, the tower isn't just stone and steel, it's a living memory. Sometimes, the most terrifying stories aren't told in words, they're whispered through the cracks of time, waiting for the right listener to lean in. As you leave, carry the weight of the stories with you, let them stay with you, not as fear, but as a quiet reminder that some places are never truly empty. And when you think you've heard the last ghost, remember, the tower is always watching, always waiting. Until next time, you ever feel like the past is whispering through the cracks in your walls? Well, it's end. Mary's Abbey has been doing just that for centuries. It's not just a church, it's a tomb, a memory, and a place where the veil between worlds is paper thin. Built in the 12th century, this place was once a beacon of faith, but by the 15th century, it had fallen into ruin. The monks fled, the bells stopped ringing, and the last prayer was said in silence. The crypt itself is a place of sorrow and sorrowful echoes. The air is heavy, and the silence is not empty, it's full of stories, of prayers, of whispers, and of something that doesn't belong. People say the curse began with a monk who dared to open a sealed tomb. The tomb wasn't meant to be disturbed, and when he did, the earth itself seemed to rebel. The ground shook, the sky darkened, and the air turned cold like the breath of something ancient. Since then, the crypt has been a place of dread. Locals say you can hear voices in the night, hear the clatter of chains, and feel a cold breath on your neck like the dead are watching, waiting, and remembering. And now, it's your turn to listen, to wonder, to feel the weight of history pressing down on you. Because sometimes, the past doesn't stay buried. It waits, and it calls. Back in the 12th century, St. Mary's Abbey was a place of quiet devotion and sacred purpose. Monks and nuns lived there in peace, tending to the sick and preserving the faith, until the plague came and turned their cloistered world into a graveyard of silence. The plague didn't just take lives, it took the very heart of the abbey. Monks were buried in mass graves, and the nuns fled in terror, leaving behind their holy relics and the scent of fear in the air. In the 16th century, a wealthy nobleman named Sir Edmund Whitmore built a grand estate nearby, hoping to claim the abbey's legacy. But the land had a memory, and the spirits of the plague victims were not so easily silenced. Sir Edmund's greed led to a bitter feud with the local villagers, who believed the abbey was cursed. His family died in a fire that no one could explain, and the house was abandoned, leaving only the stones and the whispers of the past. In the 19th century, the abbey was rediscovered by a group of archaeologists who believed they could unearth its secrets. But the ground refused to give up its dead, and the site became a place where dreams turned to nightmares. And so, St. Mary's Abbey became more than a place of worship. It became a tomb of the forgotten, a home for the restless, and a reminder that some histories are too heavy to bury. Quick word from our sponsor. If this sounds like something you'd enjoy, take a look at the Stanley Quencher 40 Oz tumbler. There's a link and a QR code on screen right now, and in the description below. Alright, back to it. You remember the first time you heard that whisper, didn't you? A soft, breathy sound, like someone just outside your door, calling your name. It was just a dream, or so you told yourself. The next morning, you found your door slightly ajar, the lock broken. No one had been there, but the air inside felt different, thicker, heavier, like the house was holding its breath. One night, you heard the whisper again. This time, it was clear. Come back, it said. Not a warning, but a plea. You didn't know if it was your mind or something else, but your heart knew it was real. You tried to ignore it. You told yourself it was just the wind, or the house settling, or the grief of the people who once lived here. But you couldn't shake the feeling that the crypt was watching you, waiting for you to come back. And so, you did. Not out of fear, but out of curiosity. You wanted to know what it was, what it meant. You wanted to find out if the whispers were a warning or a promise. You see it now, the moment frozen in time. A lone figure, dressed in a long, dark cloak, stands at the foot of the crypt's stone steps. Their face is turned toward the altar, eyes locked on something unseen. The cloaked figure doesn't move. Not a breath, not a sound. As if they're waiting for something or someone to appear. The candles flicker, casting long, jagged shadows across the cold stone walls. They reach out, hand trembling, as if to touch the altar. But just as their fingers brush the stone, the light goes out. The whisper stops, and the figure vanishes, leaving only the echo of their presence behind. No one saw them leave, no one heard them go. But the crypt remembers, and the altar still waits. But what? For whom? That's the question we're left with, like the whisper in the dark. I had a visitor last winter who swore she saw a flicker of candlelight in the abbey's crypt, even though the place had been sealed for decades. She said it was just before the storm came, and the air smelled like old roses and something else, something wrong. She described a figure in a 17th century dress, moving like smoke, never still. The woman said she felt the cold breath of something watching her, and then the light vanished like it was never there. He swore the whispers came from the walls, from the stones themselves. He said they were not the voices of the living, but of the dead, trapped in the very bones of the abbey. One woman, who lived nearby for 30 years, told me she never dared to walk the path to the abbey alone. She said the air grew heavy and the trees seemed to lean toward her, like they were trying to stop her from going further. She said the trees didn't just look like they were leaning, they were. And the further she walked, the more she felt like she was being watched by the stones, by the roots, by the silence itself. So, my dear listeners, do you believe the abbey is cursed, or is it just the weight of history, the memories of those who once lived and died there, waiting to be remembered? We arrived at St. Mary's Abbey at dawn, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and ancient stone. The silence was so deep, it felt like the world had forgotten to breathe. The investigation began with the monks' records, brittle pages filled with faded ink and whispered prayers. One entry, however, stood out, mention of a hidden chamber beneath the choir. As we descended into the crypt, the air grew colder, and the sound of our footsteps echoed like a warning. The walls were lined with crumbling tombs, each one a story waiting to be told. We found the hidden chamber behind a loose stone, its door sealed with a rusted iron lock. Inside, the air smelled of old incense and something more unsettled. The historian tried to open the lock, but it refused to budge. We stood in silence, the weight of history pressing down on us. And then, a whisper so faint it might have been the wind. We left the chamber untouched, but not without a sense of foreboding. The Abbey had its secrets, and it was clear that the past was not done with us yet. You know, the thing that has never been explained is the way the light seems to shift in that crypt, like it's coming from somewhere else entirely. It's not the flicker of a candle, not even the moonlight through the cracks. Some say it's the ghost of the last monk who died there, still trying to find his way out. Others say it's just the way the light bends in that space, like the walls are alive and breathing. No one can say for sure what it is, but they all agree it's not natural. It's like the place is holding its breath, waiting for something or someone to wake up. That's why they still leave the candle burning, not for the light, but for the silence. And maybe, just maybe, for the hope that someone, somewhere, will finally figure out what that light is trying to tell them. Some say the Abbey's secret is not in its stones, but in the stories that live in the bones of the town. The old folks still tell of a ghostly choir that sings at midnight, their voices echoing through the trees like a lullaby for the damned. Others whisper that the crypt isn't cursed, it's protected. A hidden vault, sealed by monks long ago, where the last relics of the Abbey's founder lie. Some believe it's a place where time folds in on itself, trapping souls between the living and the lost. A few locals swear they've seen a light flicker from beneath the earth, like a dying star. They say it's the Abbey's founder, still guarding his secrets, or perhaps the last of the monks, trapped in a time loop of prayer and penance. But what if the curse isn't a ghost or a relic, it's the truth? What if the Abbey's dark past is still buried, waiting for someone brave enough to dig it up, and smart enough to leave it alone? You know, sometimes the most haunting things aren't the ghosts, but the questions that never get answered. What if the real curse isn't the crypt itself, but the silence that's wrapped around this whole mystery? We dug through records, but the truth seems to vanish like mist at dawn. Was the girl really stolen, or did she run? Did she die here, or did she leave behind a secret no one ever found? Some say the crypt still holds its breath, waiting for the right question to wake the past. Others say the past is already awake, and it's just waiting for someone to listen. So, what do you think? Was the girl lost to time, or is she still here, somewhere in the cold stone, whispering her story to those who dare to listen? And if you're still wondering, remember, some mysteries don't end, they just linger, like a ghost, or a question, or a story that won't let you go. You've walked the halls of St. Mary's, felt the weight of history, and listened to whispers that still echo through the stone. But what if the true curse isn't the past, it's the silence that follows? Sometimes, the most terrifying things are the ones we don't see. A shadow that lingers just a moment too long, a breath that doesn't belong to anyone in the room. Are we being watched, or are we just being reminded of how small we are? As the day fades into dusk, the Abbey seems to hold its breath. The wind stills, the birds stop singing, and the world feels like it's holding its own breath, waiting for something to wake up. And so, we leave the Abbey behind, but not without a whisper. A soft, almost imperceptible sound like a voice, or a footstep, or a memory lingering just at the edge of hearing. Until next time, you've heard of the old abbeys, the crumbling castles, the forgotten chapel. St. Mary's is none of them. It's a place where time forgot to move on, and the silence is louder than any sound. Built in the 12th century, it was a place of prayer and peace until the Black Death swept through these lands. Then, the monks fled, and the abbey became a graveyard for both the living and the dead. Now, you must ask yourself, what kind of people would build a crypt beneath a monastery, and why would they bury their dead so deep? The abbey was founded in the 12th century by a group of Benedictine monks, men of faith, but also men with secrets. They were not the only ones buried there. Among the monks was a prior named Brother Elias, known for his peculiar devotion to the dead. He claimed to hear their voices at night, and he would speak to them in the silence of the crypt. But the true mystery lies in the bones they left behind, bones that didn't belong to the monks, and bones that were never meant to be found. And so, the crypt became more than a place of burial. It became a place of whispers, of secrets, and of a darkness that refused to be buried. You remember the first time you heard the whisper in the chapel, just before the service started. It wasn't the priest, it wasn't the wind, it was something else, something old, something watching. Then came the cold, not the kind from the window, but from the air itself, as though the stone beneath your feet had turned to ice. You looked down and saw your breath curling in the air like smoke. That night, you dreamt of a child's voice calling your name, not from the crypt, but from the silence between the stones. You woke up with a chill, your fingers numb, and the scent of something sweet and old lingering in the air. Quick word from our sponsor. If this sounds like something you enjoy, take a look at the Amazon Echo Dub smart speaker. There's a link and a QR code on screen right now, and in the description below. Alright, back to it. And then, the door. Not the one to the crypt, but the one to the chapel. It opened on its own, slowly, like a sigh. You didn't move. You just watched it, and for a moment, you thought you saw a child's hand on the doorknob. You didn't go inside, but you knew, somehow, that the next time the door opened, it would be for someone else, and that someone would never come out. One evening in 1938, a young nurse named Eleanor Whitmore vanished from the Abbey's cloister, last seen smiling at the moonlight. No one knows where she went, only that her scarf was found tangled in the roots of an ancient yew. The Abbey's monks claimed she was taken by the spirit of the abbess, who had been buried in the crypt centuries before, but no one believed them, not even the local priest. The last anyone heard of Eleanor was a whisper in the wind, carried across the Abbey's courtyard, repeating her name in a voice that was both tender and hollow. To this day, the Abbey's caretaker swears he sees her shadow by the yew tree at midnight, just before the clock strikes the hour. But when he looks, there's nothing there. Eleanor's disappearance became a legend, whispered in hushed tones over cups of mulled wine, and a warning to those who dared to walk the Abbey's halls alone at night. I've spoken to dozens of people who claim to have seen the Abbey's ghost, but one story always comes up. A woman named Clara, in her late 70s, said she saw a figure in a white robe standing at the altar, holding a candle, as if waiting for someone. She said the figure didn't move, didn't speak, but her eyes followed Clara as she walked away. Clara said she felt a chill run down her spine, like the air itself had turned colder. He said he followed the voice, only to find the crypt door locked from the inside. When he tried to open it, he heard a faint whisper, "You shouldn't have come back." These aren't just stories. They're echoes of something real, something that lingers in the stone. And if you listen closely, you can almost hear it calling you too. We began our investigation with the Abbey's archives, where the air smelled of old paper and damp stone. I wondered if the ghosts had left their own kind of fingerprints. The records spoke of a hidden chamber beneath the crypt, sealed off after a mysterious fire in the 14th century. The monks called it the Cradle of the Forgotten. As we dug deeper, we found a name Brother Thomas mentioned in every account, always in the same way. He vanished, and the fire came. Then came the strange things. The temperature dropped without wind. The air smelled of burning incense, though no one had lit a candle. And once, in the dead of night, I swear the floorboards creaked like someone was walking through the dust. We kept the investigation going, but something told me the crypt wasn't just haunted, it was hiding something the monks never meant to forget. You know, the real mystery isn't the ghost, it's the one thing no one can explain, the one detail that's been left in the dark, like a whisper in the crypt, never solved, never spoken. Every researcher, every historian, every local who's ever walked those halls has asked the same question, and every time, they're met with silence or a shrug or a look that says, "Don't ask, don't tell." You see, there's a name, just one name scrawled in the margins of that journal. A name that doesn't match any of the records. A name that's never been spoken aloud, as if the very air around it refuses to carry it. And that's the one thing that's never been explained. Not because it doesn't matter, but because maybe, just maybe, some stories are meant to stay just that, stories, not answers. You've heard the stories, but what do the locals actually say? Some swear the crypt's a gateway, others believe it's a tomb for a saint who never died. Have you ever wondered if the rumors are just stories or something more? Some say the monks who built the abbey tried to bury their sins in the crypt only to be buried by them instead. Others believe the place is cursed because it was built on a battlefield. Have you ever considered the land past before it was sacred? There are those who say the crypt is a mirror to the soul where the dead come to visit the living. Maybe that's why the air feels heavier there, like the weight of something unseen. Have you ever felt that in a place you thought was empty? Some folks even claim the crypt whispers secrets when the wind is right. They say it's not the ghosts that speak, but the stones themselves. Have you ever heard anything when the world was still and quiet? And then there's the theory no one wants to talk about. What if the crypt isn't haunted, it's just waiting for something to wake up? Have you ever wondered what the silence really means? You know, even today, no one can say for sure what happened in that crypt. Some say the monks vanished, others say they were taken by the devil. But the truth, it's still buried beneath the stones. The last official record is a ledger from 1527, listing the names of the monks, but it ends abruptly. No deaths, no absences, just silence. Like the world forgot they ever existed. Some believe the symbol is a warning, a mark left by the monks themselves. Others think it's a clue, but no one has ever followed it. And that's the real mystery, isn't it? Why not? Perhaps the truth is too dark to face. Or maybe the crypt itself won't let anyone in. You've heard the stories, but have you ever wondered what it would feel like to walk those ancient stones yourself? And if you do go, what will you find? A secret? A warning? Or just silence? Like the world forgot they ever existed. You think you've heard it all, but there's always one more whisper in the dark, waiting for the right moment to slip out of the shadows and into your mind. Sometimes the most terrifying stories are the ones that never end, lingering like smoke in the air long after the last echo has faded. So, as we part ways, I leave you with this. The past is never truly gone, and the crypts of St. Mary's may still be waiting for someone to hear their final, unanswered prayer. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a feeling there's another tale waiting just beyond this one, in the quiet corners of the world where the dead still speak. You've heard of the hollowing of Priory Hill, haven't you? A place where the earth itself seems to remember the sins of the past. It's not just a hill, it's a scar on the land, a place where the air feels heavier and the silence is too loud. Legends say that those who wander too far into the hollow are never seen again, and those who return are never the same. Some say it's the spirits of the old monks who once lived there, still seeking justice for the crimes they were forced to commit. And others say the hill is a gateway, a place where the veil between the living and the dead is at its thinnest. You know, the first settlers here weren't looking for gold or glory. They came for something else entirely: land, yes, but also a promise of safety. And they found it until they didn't. The land was rich, the soil deep and dark, but it had a cost. The settlers called it the hollowing, a name they whispered in the dark, not out of fear, but out of reverence. The first priest who came to bless the land said it was cursed, but he also said it was a test of faith, of endurance, of whether these people were worthy of the land they had taken. They built their homes, raised their children, and even planted gardens. But something in the earth resisted them. It wasn't the land itself, but the spirits that called it home. The settlers didn't understand the land's language at first, but they learned, and some of them didn't come back from learning. You remember the first time you noticed something was off? That feeling, like the air had gotten heavier, and the silence between the trees was too loud. It was just a whisper, but it clung to you like a shadow. People said it was just the wind, or the way the trees had grown close together, but you could feel it, like the land itself was holding its breath. You looked around, but no one else seemed to notice. Then came the sounds, not loud, not clear, just a faint, repeating hum that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. You tried to ignore it, but it kept returning, like a lullaby you couldn't quite remember. It was late, and the road home was long. You told yourself it was just your imagination, but something in your chest told you otherwise. You turned back once just to check, and the forest looked the same, but somehow different. That night, you dreamed of the hill, not of the trees or the hum, but of a place where the air was thick and the ground was soft, and something was waiting for you. And when you woke up, you weren't sure if you were more afraid or curious. You remember the last time you saw her, don't you? She was standing at the edge of the woods, her back to you, her hands clasped in front of her like she was praying, but her eyes were fixed on the hill, as though something was calling her name. She didn't turn around. She just stood there, waiting. And then, like the wind had carried her away, she vanished. Not in a flash, not in a scream, but gone. Just like that. Quick word from our sponsor. If this sounds like something to enjoy, take a look at the Amazon Echo Dub smart speaker. There's a link and a QR code on screen right now, and in the description below. Alright, back to it. The next morning, the town awoke to the news. The last call to her family, a whisper on the phone, a voice trembling with something more than fear. They said she'd gone to visit a friend, but no one knew who that friend was. They searched the woods for weeks, found nothing. But the hill, it still whispers, it still waits. And sometimes, in the quietest moments, you can hear her name carried on the wind, just before it goes silent. I've spoken to dozens of people who claim to have seen the light on Priory Hill. Some say it's a ghost, others say it's something else entirely. But one woman, Mrs. Langley, insists she saw a figure standing there, wrapped in a white shawl, just before her husband vanished. She described the figure as tall and thin, with a face like a child's, no features, just a soft glow. She said it looked at her, then vanished like smoke. But her husband never came home, and no one believes her. Another man, a local farmer, swore he heard a child's laughter echoing from the hill at midnight. He said it was the same sound he heard the night his daughter disappeared, years ago. He never found her, and now he doesn't speak of the hill. But sometimes, he says, when he looks up, he can still hear her laughter just before the wind picks up and carries it away. These are just a few of the many voices that speak of Priory Hill. Each one adds a thread to the same tapestry of fear, mystery, and unexplained loss. But what do they all mean? And who or what is watching? We started with the old maps, the ones tucked away in the county archives like forgotten confessions. You can almost hear the paper sigh as you pull it out, the ink faded but the lines still sharp, as if the land itself was drawn by a hand that knew its secrets. The first clue was a name, Eliza Vane, a woman who vanished in 1892. No body, no trail, just a letter left in the town church, written in a trembling hand. You can imagine the ink smudged, the words barely legible, as if the writer was too afraid to write clearly. Then came the whispers, old farmers and widows who said the hill was never the same after the fire. They spoke of a child's laughter echoing through the woods at night, and of graves that never stayed buried. You could almost feel the weight of their fear in the air. One of the investigators, a retired teacher named Marjorie, said she felt the hill watching her. She described the way the wind would change when she walked certain paths, as if the land itself was holding its breath. You could almost believe the hill had a heartbeat. And then there was the artifact, a small, carved wooden box found in the roots of an ancient tree. Inside was a child's doll, its eyes glassy and unblinking, and a single piece of paper with a name and a date. Eliza Vane, 1892. It felt like the hill had finally whispered its secret. You've heard all the stories, seen all the photos, but there's one thing that's never made sense. A mark on the wall. No one knows what it is, and no one dares ask. It's not a symbol from any known language, not a religious icon, not a brand mark, just something. Something that wasn't there when the house was built. The family that lived there said it appeared in the night, carved into the wall by some unseen hand. They tried to cover it with paint, but it came back, always in the same place. They never found the person who did it. No one ever saw a face, just the symbol, always there, always waiting. And now, it's here again, on the edge of this place, just like it was back then. You've heard the names, but the stories are never quite the same. Some say the hill was cursed by a vengeful queen. Others claim it's haunted by a family of witches who vanished without a trace. There's even a rumor that the children who played here in the 1950s still run through the woods at night, laughing as they chase the moonlight. Some locals say the hill is a gateway, a place where the veil between worlds is thinnest, and the dead come to find what they left behind. Others believe the whispers are just the wind, the echoes of a long-ago tragedy that never truly ended, and that the hill is still waiting for someone to listen. You know, sometimes the most haunting mysteries aren't solved by evidence, but by silence. The records of Priory Hill vanish after 1947, like a story too dark to be told. The last known witness, a retired teacher named Alina Whittaker, passed away in 2012, leaving behind only a diary filled with cryptic entries about the hollowing and the weight of the earth. And yet, the wind sometimes whispers through the trees, a sound like a voice, or a sigh, or a name no one can say which. So, what do you think, dear listener? Is the hill still waiting? Or has it finally let go of its secrets? Before you go, if you enjoyed this, please give it a like and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And tell us in the comments what you'd like us to make next. We read every single one. Thank you so much for watching. Comment this emoji if you made it to the end.